Welcome to Forte Catholic. I am Taylor Schroll, and this is the newest installment in our A Catholic Perspective series. This is where we take a look at things from pop culture, whether books, movies, TV shows, and try to look at them through a Catholic lens and try to find the things that are true, good, and beautiful in them. This is a special treat for me today, and hopefully a treat for you. This is the first ever actual book review that we are doing here on the channel. Typically, it's been Marvel stuff, Star Wars, movies, shows, all that kind of stuff. And I've wanted to do a book for quite some time. I listen to books primarily through Audible, and there's finally one that I wanted to share with you some of my favorite thoughts on the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson was released in the year of our Lord 2016, and I just read it this year. And when I was looking up when the book came out and that sort of thing on Amazon, I actually noticed today that it is still currently, today as I record this, the number 10 most popular book on Amazon. It got a ton of notoriety, popularity, and I had heard about it, and I had heard a bunch of people that I know and respect, both in the secular world and in the Catholic world, that were like, hey, I really like this book. And so I wanted to check it out, but it was always kind of one of those like on the back burner, kind of wanting to read, wanting to watch. We all have books and shows and movies and stuff like that are just kind of like, I'll get to it eventually, and then you never get to it. Well, earlier in this year, I was like, there's just so many, it felt like so many things were like pulling at my time and my attention. And I was like, I really need to not care about all of this, right? And I didn't really know how to best approach that. So of course I went to a book with the F word in its title. But what I want to do today is share some of the things that really stuck out to me from the book and give my overall thoughts. So here we go. Overall, I really liked this book. I would suggest it, and unless you're somebody who really doesn't like cussing. Like, I think from the title, you would know that there's probably quite a bit of cussing in it. He also does talk about some, substance abuse when he was younger, kind of sleeping around, that sort of thing. So he clearly didn't live an incredibly holy life then. It's a little better now, but I mean, he's not a saint, and he doesn't claim to be. But I thought the things that stuck out to me, like, were actually really helpful for me in my life as a Catholic, as a husband, as a father, as a person who works. Like, it just helped me in a lot of my relationships and a lot of just what I have to encounter every day. So let's go through some of these thoughts here. The first thing that stuck out to me from this book was just that his primary premise is that we just give an F about too many things. And when we care about way too many things, we start to actually lose focus on the things that we actually care about. Like, there are things, like there's a hierarchy of things that we care about. When we start caring about the 20th, 50th, 500th thing on that list, then we're really not giving our time, attention, energy, focus to those top 1, 2, 3, 4 things, like God, faith, family, our primary vocation, work, all that sort of stuff, right? So that's the primary premise of the book. The first thing that stuck out to me was that when we're caring too much, we often get caught in this spiral. And I know that I've been caught in this spiral before. Like, there's a thought spiral of we are mad at ourselves for being mad, whether it's, I am mad at myself that I'm mad at somebody else, or that I'm even mad at myself, which is, it literally creates a never ending spiral. Like, if you're mad at yourself or down on yourself and you're down or mad about that, then you're just going to keep spiraling down. And he also said that we're anxious about being anxious. So like, one of the things that I was thinking about is, like, we're always hearing about like tragedies overseas, or like whether it's natural disasters or wars, all these things. And, this is something that we tend to and typically pray for at Mass. Like, we'll pray for the Pope, we'll pray for disasters, we'll pray for, victims of war and that sort of thing. And I always felt growing up in church that, like, I didn't care about that as much as I should, or as much as like other people in the congregation. I kind of felt like I wasn't as good as the other people in the pews, because I just couldn't bring myself to care about these things. And it always bothered me that I didn't care as much as other people seemed to. And I think it was young Taylor actually kind of having my priorities straight in some strange way, is that, like, I tend to care more about the things that are in my control. Like, I can't control a tsunami halfway across the world. I can't control war in the Middle East. There's really nothing that I can do about it. So I'm going to focus and put my positive thoughts and energy and focus on the things that I can actually control or influence. And I'm not going to worry as much about the things that I can't. And I think that Mr. Manson here is agreeing with me on that. And it was just nice to hear that put into words, because I still do kind of feel bad that it's harder for me to connect in like an emotional way to bad things that are happening to people way over there or way out of my control. But I think it's not that I don't care. It's just that I care more about the people around me, right? And here's his primary premise. If you give an F about little stuff, it means that you don't have you don't have enough real things in your life to care about, or your priorities are out of order. So if you find little things taking your focus and taking your brain power, your time and your energy, where your thoughts are going, if it's on little things, it either means that like you need to find something else to care about, or that your priorities are out of order. Like, you're caring so much about this little thing and not as much about like, the things that are really actually important to you. For me, it's like I will get hyper fixated on like if somebody's mad at me, or if I think somebody's mad at me. That's a big part of why I read this book. Is like I'll leave interactions with people and think about that negative interaction for hours, if not days, and that affects like the things that I actually care about, like spending time with my family. I might be grumpy or aloof because I'm mad about this other thing that has nothing to do with them. Or I might, things will just drain me so much that I like don't have the energy or like the brain power to want to work, which is like my work is stuff that I actually do care about. So for me, it's a priorities thing, right? Like let me make sure that I'm not putting so much care into this little thing that it's affecting the things that I actually care about, that are actually priorities for me. He talks here about emotions. He says that negative emotions are a call to action, and that positive emotions are rewards for taking the proper action. So positive ones, okay, great. Like I did the right action. I feel good about it. Whether it's, I accomplished something or I did a good deed. All positive emotions are just like, hey, buddy, thumbs up. You did the right thing. But negative emotions, a lot of times we get stuck, or we stop, or we slow down, or we pull away when we have negative emotions, when he's actually saying that they are a call to action. So from a faith perspective, this happens a lot, where it's like, I feel negative about myself because I didn't pray yesterday, or I feel negative about myself because I did X, Y, and Z sin, and now I'm going to pull away from God. But those negative emotions are a call to action. They're a call to return to prayer, to return to the Lord. They're a call to return to the confessional so that I can, have my relationship with God healed, reunited. So that was a good reminder for me, because a lot of times negative emotions do pull me back, like Catholic guilt and shame and all of these things. Whenever God wants us to go to Him, whether we're feeling positive emotions, negative emotions, or feeling nothing, He wants us to approach Him. The next thing, it was a story that really, really kind of stuck with me, because it hit a little bit too close to home. He says there was a guy who was kicked out of a band, and so he started a new band. That new band became the most successful metal band ever. It was called Megadeth. So this guy who started Megadeth, who's, I know some of our Screamo people listen to the show and enjoy stuff here on the channel, might really love Megadeth. I'm not super familiar. The only problem for him was that the band that he was kicked out of was Metallica, who's more popular, more famous, right? And he still to this day feels like a failure, even though he started and was in the most successful metal band ever. And so Mark is asking you, what's your measuring stick? What's your measuring stick for success? And man, this gets me all the time. Like if 10 years ago me could see where I'm at now, like I'd be thrilled. Like the 10 years ago version of me would be thrilled where I am now. Like to have as many listeners to the podcast that we have, to have done as many speaking events, and to see the family that I have now, and to see the coaching that I've done for sports. Like 10 years ago, me didn't have those things. And now I do. And yet a lot of times I'm still unhappy with how slow the progress seems to me, right? So, for example, with the podcast that we do here every week, when we first started, we were having less than 100 listeners every single week. And then the next year, it was around 200 listeners. And the next year, it was about 400. The next year, it doubled again. So for years, it was just doubling and doubling and doubling. And yet, I still don't really feel as thankful as I should be for that growth. I'm always just like, I want more, I want more, I want more, I want more. So what's the measuring stick was actually kind of a knife into my heart, a knife into my mind of like, when am I going to be happy? When is enough, right? Like, I love growth. I love when things grow, and I would like to continue to see them grow. But 10 years ago, me would have been like, I would be thrilled if 200 people would give me an hour of their time every week by listening to the podcast. And yet now I'm like sad if we drop from, 1,500 to 1,300 in a week. Like, that's 200 people, right? Like, so it's just about where's the measuring stick? When are we going to be happy? When are we going to be thankful? So it's just a really good story, because I think, he's way more, this guy that started this band was in Metallica, clearly more successful than me, but even he wasn't happy. So for me, it's like, what would happen? Because like, essentially it's like, I've been along for this journey. You've been along for your work progress, for your relationship progress, whatever. So it's easy for us to just be like, oh, is it better than yesterday? But like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but it's definitely better than 10 years ago, right? So what's the measuring stick for success for you? Because I don't want to be like this guy and still disappointed, feeling like a failure after I've actually accomplished some good things already and the good things that I'm going to accomplish in the future. And then he shares a quote. He kind of reworks a quote from one of the most popular pop culture quotes of all time from Spider-Man. Spider-Man always says, with great power comes great responsibility. He says, with great responsibility comes great power. So like, the more responsible we are, the more likely we are to be given control of things, to be given power. But also, when we are given that power, like, we have to be responsible. The more things that we are responsible for, the more we have to recognize the power that is and use it well. Kind of going back to the emotions aspect of this, he dives into emotions quite a bit. He says that your unhappiness may not be your fault, but it is your responsibility. I have a responsibility for my part of a relationship, even if the bad thing that happened wasn't my fault. I didn't choose my circumstance, but I'm the one who can choose how to respond to it. I struggle with this a lot, because especially when I feel, and I think a lot of times I'm right, when somebody else in a relationship really messes it up, and I kind of let my emotions go, and I'm just reacting. I'm like, they're the worst and it's all their fault and all these sorts of things, right? When it was not my choice, when somebody made a decision or said something or did something that like hurt me or I didn't think was right, but it is still my responsibility and my choice for how I respond to it. So I think a lot of times, I mentioned earlier that, like, if somebody says something wrong to me or says something mean or something doesn't go well, or I think I didn't say the right thing, I'll ponder on it for hours, if not days. And I kind of get in my head about that, right? So the idea that unhappiness may not be my fault, but it is my responsibility. It's like, I think after reading this book and kind of going through some spiritual growth this year, I think I'm getting better. I'm still not quite there yet, but getting better at being able to like compartmentalize and be like, look, this bad thing happened, but I'm going to make a choice to spend time with my kids right now. I'm going to make a choice to be happy. And even if I'm by myself, like watch a funny Family Guy episode or something, instead of just wallowing in this self-pity or this anger or whatever it is. Right. So my happiness is my choice, is my responsibility. A quote directly from Mark. He said, I thought happiness was a destiny, not a choice. So this goes back to being connected to the story of the lead guy in Megadeth. It's like happiness isn't somewhere like if you're like, I'll be happy when X, Y, and Z happens. Either you'll never be happy or you won't be happy for a very long time, right? Happiness and being happy is a choice that I can make now. Like I remember going on mission trips to Mexico and like honestly seeing like how a lot of people lived, like just the poverty. It genuinely made me sad. like I was sad seeing how like people were living legitimately in cardboard boxes, and it made me sad. And they would walk around and they were smiling and they were playing soccer and they were having a good time and they were like making lemonade and sharing it with each other and sharing it with us. And it was just like they get this. They have made the choice to be happy despite their circumstances, and it was an inspiration to me, honestly, because I'm like obviously their situation isn't great and we were there to try to help make it a little better, right? That's a big part about going on mission trips. It's like you learn a lot about yourself and like your own privilege, but then also just like, man, I think I get really happy when I get a new PlayStation game, but they're like, man, I'm just happy to be living another day, just because that's a choice that they've made. There's a story about valuing yourself and valuing your work. The story of Picasso, the artist. He was doodling on a napkin and like in a coffee shop or something. And a lady, or a pub, whatever they had back then, a lady wanted to buy it. He said that'd be $20,000. And she was mad at him. She was kind of taken aback. She's like, the doodle only took you 2 minutes to draw. And he said, no, it actually took me 60 years to get here, right? It took me 60 years to acquire the skills needed to be able to draw a doodle this good that somebody else wants it in 2 minutes, right? So just valuing himself, valuing your work. That's something that it's kind of an inspiration for me too. And I actually had a priest in my life say like, hey, you should probably charge more for the work that you're doing just to value your own work. You know, things take time, right? And a lot of us think about our job in like an hourly wage, right? But what goes into that hour of work was also like the schooling you got and the experiences that you've had and the expertise that you've gained throughout the years. So valuing not just your time, but your expertise as well was kind of a mind shift for me. Speaking of relationships and emotions, if I define myself by everyone liking me, then the results are out of my control. As a people pleaser, this one really hit home for me because people liking me is out of my control. And because I'm an extrovert and I say everything that pops into my head, sometimes it's not the perfect thing to say in a perfect scenario and people may not like it. But if I define myself by everyone liking me, the results are out of my control. It's in their hands. I can instead say, I'm going to improve my social life. That puts it back on me and also plans for some failures. Like if you're saying something, I'm going to improve something, it means that you're admitting that something isn't good now. And anytime that we know that we're trying to improve something, we kind of make the correct assumption that it's going to take some work and it's not going to be a perfect process all the way through. So instead of letting other people define you, again, making the choice and taking the ownership back on you of what can I control in this scenario. I mentioned earlier that he had struggled with some, drugs, money, women issues. He said that excesses seem good until you start to drown in them, right? So he admits that that sleeping around and that drugs and money, he enjoyed them until like he wasn't in control anymore. Like he wasn't able to take back control because they were in control of his life, and he felt like he was drowning. All right, last few little points. We're kind of. He talks about quite a bit, a lot of relationship stuff, a lot of work stuff, a lot of personal life stuff. But he comes back around to this primary point is that we all have to give an F about something. We have to say yes to our priorities, which often means rejecting other things, even if they're good. I think this is part of growing older, but then also growing in maturity in the spiritual life is realizing that like at some point we're not choosing between good and evil. Like that's what we did as kids. It's like, do I take the cookie when my mom's not looking, or do I not take the cookie when my mom's not looking? And now we're trying to decide between things of like, do I spend more time at work? Do I spend more time with my kids? Do I spend more time with my wife? Do I go to the gym? Do I eat better? Do I make food instead of ordering DoorDash? Do I like we're trying very, very often, unless it comes to like stuff that's sinful, we're choosing between two good things because we have limited resources or primarily time. We're like, we all have made the decision to not go to the gym to take care of our bodies because we're either busy from work or we're exhausted because we worked too late and then we got to sleep late and then we woke up early with the kids. Like all these things are priorities. But I think I let it happen to myself a lot instead of like making the choice of like, what do I actually care about and putting those priorities in order. We have to say no to things based on our values and the identity that we want to have. A lot of times we say we don't want to say no to things because we don't want to hurt people, but it begins to affect who we are. Like again, like as a people pleaser, I totally get this. Like, we want to say yes to everything, but I learned the power of saying no a few years ago, and kind of the freedom of being able to say no, of like, somebody asks me to do something. I'm like, no, that's not like in my primary focus right now. Like, I know one of the things was whenever COVID hit and I was having, we lost a ton of money and I was having to just kind of shift what I was doing. I was saying yes to any and all editing work. But then as we became a nonprofit and we got some more work and things started to rebound a little bit, I was like, you know what? Like, editing like secular podcasts or just not Catholic podcasts just really isn't like in our purview. Like, the primary thing that we are trying to do is create great Catholic content. And so I took a lot of those clients and I was actually able to give them to somebody else who was struggling, right? Who also lost some work because of COVID. So it ended up being like a good thing for me because I was getting like overworked and overrun. And it ended up being a good thing for this other person that I said no to something that I was already doing, right? And some people were okay with it and they were fine with it. Other people weren't that thrilled about it, right? But I was like, I've made a decision. This is what we're going to do, and it's worked out. Like, I've been able to grow the Catholic part of what we're doing, like these things that I really, really and truly care about, because we were able to let go of some of those other clients. Talk about relationships. An unhealthy relationship is two broken people using each other for gratification or an escape. A healthy relationship is two flawed people trying to grow with each other's help. So, I think a lot about like with dating, right? Like we have 50% of our marriages end in divorce. It's like, it's two broken people. We admit in both that we're broken or flawed, right? But in the bad relationship, we're using each other for gratification or an escape. But in the healthy one, we recognize that we're flawed people. We're trying to get better. We're doing it together and with each other's help. And then finally, the most Catholic thing that Mark said in this book is we have to live with death in mind. I'm like, man, this guy is totally down with the memento mori culture that has been sweeping through Catholicism for the last half decade or so. I mean, it's existed from long before that, but it got cool 5 or so years ago. It brings our values into focus. When we keep death in mind, it brings our values into focus, and it helps us to recognize how we want to be remembered. Like, we hear all the time about people on their deathbed, like, nobody's like, I wish I spent more or gained more in my 401k or built up my portfolio. It's like, no, like, what are the things? I wish I had spent more time in church, loving people, loving my family. I wish I had spent more time focusing on the things that I really cared about in my career. Like, we have these hierarchy things. It's like, what is the legacy that we want to leave? How do we want to be remembered? How do we want to live? And frankly, whenever we're on our deathbed, do we know where we're going? Like, have we lived a life where we have put priorities in order? We've lived well. We loved well, both God and those around us. So those are my thoughts on the subtle art of not giving an F by Mark Manson. I would recommend it. It was helpful for me. But again, if cussing or that sort of thing bothers you, obviously stay away from it. So there is another book that is, I think, is kind of like a Christian version of it that I read right after this book that I'll be doing a review on hopefully next week. It's called Get Your Life Back by John Eldredge. He's a famous Christian author. He wrote Wild at Heart, which is a book that every guy my age that was in church read probably when we were teenagers, young adults. It has a lot of these similar things. It addresses relationships and right priorities and putting God first and all of these sorts of things as well. So if you're looking for a more Christian version that attacks a lot of these similar issues, hopefully that video will be out very soon. So hit subscribe to the channel so you don't miss that. Thank you guys for spending some time with me today. And if you've read the book, let me know what you think in the comments. If you haven't, let me know why, or go give it a read and then come back and leave some comments on what you thought. God bless. Love you guys. See you soon.